Hello and welcome to our first webinar in our World Youth Day series, celebrating the legacy of World Youth Day. I'm Alex Cranston, the production coordinator for the Catholic Apostolate Center, and I'd like to welcome our host, Dr. Charlotte McCorquodale. Charlotte is the president and CEO of Ministry Training Source, and we're pleased to have her hosting this conversation. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, please send a message in the chat box to me, the Catholic Apostolate Center, in the bottom right of your screen, and I'll be sure to help you out. Throughout the conversation, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please send them in the Q&A box, and if we have time, we will try to answer them. Now, I'll turn things over to Charlotte to introduce today's panelists.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome again to this webinar celebrating the legacy of World Youth Day. You know, I remember back in 1993 when I had first heard about World Youth Day as I was preparing to take 8 busloads of young people there. I was amazed at the thought of what it would be. And now that I look back on the 7 or so World Youth Days that I've participated in, I have to say that personally, World Youth Day has been about helping to transform me and my ministry. And today I hope we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more with our panelists about this legacy of World Youth Day that was given to us and gifted to us from St. John Paul II. Today we're very lucky to have a great panel of folks with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment. But what we're taking a look up here, a picture of, is in Krakow. Paul Dozabowski, would you mind telling us a little bit about this center and how it was dedicated, just so that people, maybe if they weren't in Krakow, they would kind of know what this is all about?
So this right here is the John Paul II shrine in Krakow, and so really this celebrates his legacy in Krakow and in that experience that for the Polish people. So it's there, and so many people who were in Krakow for World Youth Day might remember going to this. It's right next to the Divine Mercy Sanctuary.
All right, great, thank you. All right, so let's meet our panelists. I have the pleasure of knowing most of these panelists very well, and they've all contributed a great amount to our church and to World Youth Day. So I'm going to stop my camera so that other folks can have theirs be shared. So Arlene, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you're connected to World Youth Day and what kind of ministry you're involved in now.
Okay, I'm Sister Eileen McCann, and I am a sister of St. Joseph of Carondelet, and I presently serve on our province leadership team. My connection to World Youth Day has been long and varied. I was connected first as a chaperone, then as a classes and youth director, taking young people to the various World Youth Days, and then from Paul Jarzembowski's desk, where I was at USCCB. I actually went to the very first World Youth Day in Rome, although at that point we weren't sure what it was all going to be about or even what that was about. And I claim 8.5 World Youth Days. The half is real because I started at the USCCB side and then turned it over to Paul's very capable hands.
All right, thank you so much, sister. The very first one, that's great. It must have been an exciting time to be in Rome for that. Now if we could have Paul Henderson, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little bit about the ministry you're doing now and how you are especially connected to really the event that introduced the majority of the U.S. church to World Youth Day, which was Denver World Youth Day.
Thanks, Charlotte. My name is Paul Henderson, and at this point, I'm sliding into retirement here in Delaware on the beach. And my first connection with World Youth Day actually was in '89 when I represented the U.S. bishops and took 9 young adults over to participate in the International Youth Forum at Santiago de Compostela, and then on to, in '91, into Częstochowa, Poland. And it was actually in Częstochowa that the Pontifical Council for the Laity first began to talk to us about holding an event in the United States. And then I was director of programming and events for World Youth Day in Denver, as well as associate director of the Secretariat for Family, Laity, Women, and Youth in the Youth and Young Adult Ministry. So actually, I'm really excited to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
It's hard to believe it's been 25 years, huh, Paul?
Yes, it is. Every time I go out skiing in Denver, I always look for Cherry Creek State Park and think of the butterfly we had to relocate and the groundhogs we had to relocate.
Yeah, I think a lot of things about Cherry Creek Park, I have to say they're not all so positive.
Yeah, right.
Gabriella, would you please share your camera, please, and introduce yourself and your connection to World Youth Day?
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm Gabriela Karaszewski. I'm currently in the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston. And my first World Youth Day was in 2000, Rome with St. John Paul II. My second one was just 2 years ago in Krakow. The first time they dragged me there, I didn't want to go there. The second time I dragged 72 young adults for the amazing experience in Krakow and the Year of Mercy. So that's who I am and where I have been.
Oh, great. Welcome. And Gabriella, what are you involved in now in these days in ministry?
Oh, so I am the director of young adults and campus ministry at the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston.
Okay, excellent. Great. Thank you very much. And then finally, Paul Jarzembowski.
Well, it's good to be with you all. So I'm Paul Jarzembowski. I am the currently working at the desk that Sister Eileen once worked at, and where Paul Henderson once worked here at the USCCB. I am the Assistant Director for Youth and Young Adult Ministries, which means I'm the National Coordinator for the World Youth Day efforts for the United States. I actually was a pilgrim in Denver in 1993. That was my first when I was a little bit younger, and then have been to several World Youth Days since, both from a diocesan perspective as well as here at the USCCB, and looking forward to Panama in a couple of months.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm not going to say that you're making me feel old by the fact that you were a teenager then, but I will say it is making me feel old, so I am going to say that, I guess. Can't believe you were a teenager. My goodness. We were supposed to have another panelist, Dorota. I'm not even sure. How do you say her last name, Paul?
It's Dorota Abdamola.
Yeah, she's just recently let us know today that she's going to be unavailable. Will you tell us a little bit about who she was and what, her involvement would have been?
Sure. So Dorota was one of the key organizers for World Youth Day in Krakow. Dorota now works in Rome at the Vatican. She works in the dicastery for laity, family, and life. She does a lot with the World Youth Day from Rome's perspective, but she was key and instrumental to really putting on World Youth Day in Krakow.
Oh, okay. Well, she did an amazing job. That's awesome. Well, let's go ahead then and begin with prayer. I'd like to go ahead and ask both Eileen and Paul Henderson if you could put your cameras on, and I'll lead us. Let's take some time here to pray together. Let's take a moment to recognize our loving God's presence within each of us and within this community of faith that has gathered over so many years at different World Youth Days, and that's gathered here today virtually. Mr. Eileen?
Merciful Father, you call us to live our lives as a way of salvation. Help us to recall the past with gratitude, to embrace the present with courage, and to build the future with hope. Lord Jesus, our friend and brother, thank you for looking upon us with love. Let us listen to your voice as it resonates in the hearts of each one with the strength and light of the Holy Spirit.
Grant us grace of being a church that goes forth with vibrant faith and a youthful face to communicate the joy of the gospel. May we help to build up the kind of society we long for, one where there is fairness and fellowship. We pray for the Pope and for the bishops, for young people, for all those who will take part in World Youth Day in Panama, and for those who are preparing to welcome them. Our Lady of Antigua, patroness of Panama, help us to pray and live with generosity like yours. I am the servant of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word. Amen.
Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Right.
Alex, I was wondering if I could ask you a question. Are people able to type into the chat there and communicate? I meant to ask you that as we got started, or is that something that if I asked folks to put something in the chat, they could do that?
Yeah, they can put things in the chat. They can send them directly to me, and I can relay them. Or
Okay.
they can put things in the Q&A, and then we can answer those when it comes to the time.
Okay, great. So if in the chat area, if you wouldn't mind putting your name and where you're coming in from, just so we know who we all have with us today, that would be great. Gabriella, I'd like to take just a moment to talk about the legacy of St. John Paul II and his institution of World Youth Day. Can you tell us a little bit about when you took this picture?
Yes, this was one of the life-changing moments in my life. I landed in Rome today, 18 years ago. It was a night, and the first thing we did, we woke up the next day, which was the beginning of all the events, and we were right there in St. Peter's around 8 a.m. They started making already the lines because they said John Paul will be crossing there around 5 p.m. So yes, I stood up in the very front like a good Mexican woman, didn't go to the restroom from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., didn't eat any food because I would not give up my spot on the very front of the barrier. And yes, lo and behold, he went in front of me and I was able to take this picture. I felt a power that I have felt many times when I was close to John Paul II. I can only explain it's like a saintly power of the Holy Spirit that was just irradiating from this man. So this is the picture that I took and I hold here in my desk and reminds me of why of my ministry today.
Well, thank you so much. You know, I remember I was in Denver in the stadium when Pope John Paul II arrived by helicopter, and I remember I had this big old cell phone. I mean, when I say it was one of those big cell phones that, I know y'all remember them. And I was on there watching it, and I remember calling my grandmother, and she was saying, I really was surprised at how excited I was going to be, because at that point in my life I'd never seen a pope. And I just remember her saying to me, I was like, Grandma, he's landing. I can't wait. And she was like, and I was in charge of 8 busloads, but I was just like one of the kids in terms of my excitement about the experience that I was having of the universal church. And who would have known way back then that he would have been able through this event to touch so many people. Would any of our panelists like to comment about John Paul II and what he did for the church through World Youth Day?
Charlotte, one of the things this is Paul Henderson, one of the things that struck me, and it really struck me very powerfully, standing at the base of the shrine in Czestochowa and looking out over the crowd and coming to the realization that, for JP2, these World Youth Days, they weren't a one-off, but they really were his way of empowering young people and evangelizing. And I really think that deep in his heart, and sometimes in some of the meetings we had with Vatican folks for preparing for Denver, what they would say is that JP2 would re-evangelize the church through the young people. And so there was a real intentionality with the Holy Father, and that this was the way he was going to really re-evangelize the new evangelization of the church.
This is Sister Eileen. I want to pick up on that because, if you read back all the messages that St. John Paul II has given to young people, it's a strong message to them and their gifts and why the church needs them. And I remember clearly at Cherry Creek State Park, I was on the board for the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministry at the time, so we had VIP seats. And I had my nephew up there with me, who at that point was going into his freshman year in high school. I was cheating a little on this. And as we watched that helicopter land and watched what the Secret Service was doing, I said to him, Brian, if the Pope has his way, he's coming to the fence to meet young people. Secret Service has his way, they're going to push him to the back of the stage. Well, he came to the fence. And Brian said to me, can I go? I said, yes. And so he jumped down and put his hand up, and I could follow his baseball cap as he touched him. And the other day, we were talking, and he said to me, he's now married and has his own family, but he said to me, you know, I look back on that, and I realize now I touched the hand of a saint. And I said, what makes him a saint? And he said, because he believed in us young people.
Wow.
You know, and my other nephew who never ever mentions World Youth Day, so I figured it had no impact, said to me not long ago, when are you taking my kids to World Youth Day? I said, that ship has passed. That sailed. Somebody else can do it.
Thank you, sister. Thank you, Gabrielle. Oh, that's great. So we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of World Youth Day. Here you see some pictures that Father Ralph O'Donnell shared with us. Quick test. What was the song that was the theme song for World Youth Day? I wish we could have the participants type this in. I'm not really seeing the participant chat. But somebody tell me, what was the song that we sang for World Youth Day, and so we couldn't sing it anymore?
We are one body.
We are one body. Yes, that was an amazing song. So, Cherry Creek Park, Denver, Colorado. It took me and my group 7 hours to get into the park on a road that surrounded Cherry Creek, which was called the Dam Road. And it was actually really an appropriately named road back then because there was no water. There were no bathrooms for almost hours as we walked through to get there. And you could just see this mass of people that you see on the screen here coming together slowly throughout that whole day. Any memories, Paul, of Cherry Creek Park? And you were saying something about the Gophers?
Incredible memories of Cherry Creek State Park. Probably the funniest one was it was Saturday night. We were doing pre-animation before the vigil began, and I think it was Michael Smith was on the stage. We were running about a half an hour late. And the Secret Service agent that was in charge of Cherry Creek came up to me and said, okay, the Holy Father will be here in 5 minutes. And I said, oh, no, we can't. We're not ready for him. And he said, well, he's going to be here. And just out of the blue, I said, well, tell the helicopter to give him a tour a few times. And he said, oh, that's a good idea. I'll do that. And so that was it. The other image was it's sort of like when it was all over on Sunday and I was about half dead. We had so many pilgrims that were separated from their groups, and I remember just being up on the stage and announcing through the PA system, if so and so is lost, they're here on the stage. If you know them, please come and get them. Until they literally were tearing the stage down around me.
That's great. Paul Jarzembowski, as a young person, what was your favorite memory of Cherry Creek Park? Do you remember being there?
Oh, I do, but you know, most of my biggest memory is actually a couple of days earlier. I think the Cherry Creek thing was a little bit of a blur, but what I remember most was the fact that throughout the day when John Paul arrived, it was raining all day. It was thunderstorming and raining. It was just gloomy. And as a pilgrim there, all of a sudden we were in Mile High, and all of a sudden we thought the thunder was getting louder and louder, when it turns out actually it was this helicopter that was getting closer and closer. And I think we all figured that out. We just erupted. And what was interesting was as soon as he entered the Mile High, I mean, again, this is my memory remembering this, the rain stopped. The rain stopped, the rainbow came out, and then he began to talk. And I think that was there was something there. It was almost in a way as if it kind of recalled that scriptural image, like where the clouds kind of part and kind of you get the voice of God saying, listen. And that's kind of what I think it was, because I think at that moment, I think for all of us who were young, you know, having thunder and lightning just stop and the sun come out was, you know, was kind of a like, whoa, this is weird. And so it caused us to lean our ears in a little bit more and really listen to what John Paul had to say. So that to me was very vivid. And I do recall at different occasions that whenever he would speak, there was this moment of, you need to pay attention to this. And, you know, don't matter what's going on around you. But that's just something I do recall. Is it seemed he had a lot of impact on the weather, or maybe that was Paul Henderson. I'm not sure who had that much impact on the weather.
He definitely had some power somewhere.
It was the hottest part of the summer in Denver.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, you know, I remember that moment, Paul. That's so interesting that you share that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think right after that incredible moment and after he spoke, I had to go down and check on a couple of sick kids, and I literally had a paramedic tell me at the bottom of the Mile High Stadium, okay, lady, you've reached your limit on the number of kids that you can bring in here now. I was like, okay, well, tough. I just never forget that, because I was like, well, it has been a lot. So let's move on then. We do have a couple more Denver slides, and then we'll start talking about it. This is some photos from Denver. And this is something that Pope John Paul II said to young people, and it really did echo, Eileen, what you had said to us about what his different messages. With your youthfulness, he said, put your mark of hope and enthusiasm, so typical of your age on the millennium that is just beginning. If you allow the grace of God to work in you and earnestly fulfill this commitment daily, you will make this century a new and better time for everyone. And, you know, he did say a number of amazing things like that throughout this weekend. Again, you can see as some of the rain that you're mentioning there, you can see all the umbrellas and the backpacks that are all reminiscent of World Youth Day and the many opportunities that young people have to celebrate the sacrament of reconciliation. We really are blessed in World Youth Day to have so many bishops from all over the world participating. So I'd like to take a moment just to talk a little bit about some of the bishops that we've had involved and which World Youth Days have they been most involved in. Does anyone recall what event had the most bishops from the U.S. participate? Besides for Denver, of course, we'll assume that we had the most U.S. bishops at the U.S. World Youth Day in Denver. But beyond that, some of you that have worked with the World Youth Day, USCCB, what are some of the largest groups and contingencies of bishops that we've had?
Well, I know in Germany, which would have been Pope Benedict's first one, we had 75 bishops, which was the largest outside of the North American continent. So there were 75. We had to house them in 2 different hotels in order to have space for all of them. And I do remember one bishop showing up. Now, there were 3 places to register. And this bishop showed up and said to me, have you got a room for me? He never registered. He claimed he did, but he never registered. There were 3 different areas we checked where he could have registered. But nonetheless, he showed up and he became the mayor of Bonn in Germany.
You know, let's take a minute to talk about, and I'll again throw this back to maybe Paul Jarzembowski, but what impact has World Youth Day had on bishops? Or maybe Paul Henderson, I don't know if either one of you want to add in terms of bishops involved in World Youth Day and how that's made such a difference.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I think was a great part of the legacy for World Youth Day in terms of the bishops, and it's one of the things that we talked about at USCCB for Denver was that our hope before the event, and it bared its fruit, was that in many ways the young people evangelized the bishops. And after the event, there were bishops who were saying, we were evangelized by the young people. And it was just such a grace moment of the bishops really realizing the power of bringing 200, 300,000 young people together. And it was sort of like an awakening for them. And then even the next one was in Manila. There was about 50 or 60 bishops that traveled to Manila for that. I think in Czestochowa, the 91, we only had about 20, 25 bishops. So Denver, I think, really was a seminal point of the bishops really understanding the power of World Youth Day. And when we were beginning to plan it, one of the challenges we had was that this was something totally new to both the bishops, but also the youth ministry community. So it was sort of like a little bit of seeing with new eyes.
Right, and one of the scenes I remember from Cherry Creek is the young people. First of all, the young people, and they waited for the Pope to arrive. We had entertainment on the stage, but they were not restless. They were involved, but someone started the wave. And as it got to the bishops, who were all sitting behind the stage, they didn't move. They didn't do it. So the young people did it again, and then they still didn't do it. And now there were some boos. Well, by the third time around, all the bishops did it, and the young people gave them this huge standing ovation. I think at that point the bishops realized how important their presence was.
Yeah.
And when I was at the USCCB, so many of them that would want to be catechists at the different World Youth Days that would call to get their name on that list.
Yep, I think that in Mile High Stadium, when they did that wave, the first time I think I really saw bishops being converted by young people. That was the moment that you just, because they're just like the young people were excited, their eyes lit up as well. Paul Grzybowski, what would you say about that? And I'm going to move on after that.
So one of the things that we always actually ask, we do some surveys with leaders and with young people after different World Youth Days, and we ask them what was your favorite part. And one of the things that comes to the top of the list as either number 1 or 2 is the interaction they have with their with their bishops from their country. They really enjoy the catechesis with them, with engaging with them. And the bishops also report how much they enjoy that because it allows them to really be shepherds. In addition to just being transformed by the young people, the World Youth Day experience also gives bishops an opportunity to really, live into their ministry of accompaniment, and they love it. So yeah, and Sister Eileen is correct. There are bishops who continue to call and write me who say, I'd love to be present at the next World Youth Day. I want to speak to the young people. I'd love to be there. I'd love to listen to them, to be with them. So there's an excitement. There's an energy. I think it gives them a lot of hope, and it gives them a sense of again the core of what it means to be a pastor in the church is to really just walk with these men and women who really the most that when bishops are in their diocese, sometimes they're being called up by different groups and people want different things from them and they're committed to so many meetings. At World Youth Day, they're allowed to simply just literally walk with the young people. And the only thing a young person is chasing after them to do is maybe to get a selfie and really just to be in their presence. And I think that's very relieving for many of them. So they enjoy that. You can see some of the pictures on the screen, how much they really just love it. Even in the rain, they come out, they smile, they laugh. It's part of the joy that really infuses this is their presence as well.
Absolutely.
I do remember at Cherry Creek State Park, Bishop Clark, who was then the Bishop of Rochester, spent the night in the park with his young people. He was much younger.
Yeah.
That's a great guy.
Yeah, and the Diocese of Rochester still talks about that today, to this day.
Yeah, I remember encouraging Archbishop Lipscomb not to take the bus with us him not to stay in the park. I told him I thought it would be a really good idea for him to do that. 8 busloads of young people were plenty to take care of.
And I really, also to pick up on what Paul just said, I remember Bishop O'Keefe, who was then the Bishop of Syracuse. We got back from Cherry Creek State Park with every one of our pilgrims, Paul Henderson. And Bishop O'Keefe was sitting on the front step of our hotel. We had a small hotel by ourselves. And he was dressed in casual clothes and engaging the young people in conversation about what they had just experienced. It was wonderful.
Yep, it's really been a blessing. Hey, Paul, can you explain to us why you're standing, where you're standing, and how this is all connected to World Youth Day?
I think it just proves that no matter where I go in the world, I'm always wearing a suit and tie. I think that's one thing. So this is at St. Peter's Square. You see the St. Peter's Basilica behind me there. This is Palm Sunday, which actually Palm Sunday is the day that John Paul II kind of outlined as the day to celebrate young people. I guess when John Paul was growing up and he would hear the verses and the songs on Palm Sunday, he always imagined that it was youth and young adults who were the ones who were welcoming Jesus into Jerusalem, and it was all the people who were older than that who were then in the rest of the story trying to crucify him. So he always positioned the young people as kind of the protagonists and the good guys in the Passion narrative on Palm Sunday. So for him, it really made a lot of sense that he would call together people on that day. For many years, the different movements would come to Rome, and they would set up camp on Palm Sunday weekend and join in on the liturgies. You could even, back in John the 23rd, there's a homily in the 1960s where he makes reference to the amount of young people who have gathered, and he kind of makes note of that in his homily. So this is an occasion. So what happens is every year in Rome, different people gather, and I had the occasion a couple of years ago, well, actually last year and a couple of years before that, to witness the transfer of the cross from one country to another. So from Rio to Poland, and then from Poland to Panama, I've seen those transfers. And in the squares is really this celebration. So Palm Sunday is the day that the Pope celebrates young people, and every now and then we get an opportunity to join him in that as well.
And actually, the first World Youth Day that I did go to was Palm Sunday weekend in Rome.
Yep.
Right. All right, so maybe we can then move on now. Just what you're seeing on the screen there are the different World Youth Days. I guess there wasn't one there's the one in Rome. I guess that would have been, what year was that?
Yeah, so 84 and 85, there are logos for it. They weren't technically World Youth Days yet. The first two were trial runs, and John Paul got so excited about it, he in 1985, he said, all right, we're going to make this an annual thing. So then 86 then became the first official one.
Right, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm looking at my information here.
There's something about a World Youth Day logo. They just really all, are all so well done, and they just kind of have a feel to them that is really something else. So I'm going to now pull up a poll. So give me just a second here. I'd like you to take out your phones if you don't mind. Can everybody see that? If you go to menti.com on your phone or on your computer, if you have another screen open on your computer, let's see from the group that we have gathered here, which World Youth Days you've been involved in. So you ought to be able to check off all the World Youth Days that you attended, menti.com. And we have 3 questions we're going to do. So the first one is asking you to choose the World Youth Days you attended. So just click off all of the ones that you were at. All right. So it seems like the majority of us have attended both World Youth Days in Denver and in Krakow. But it looks like we have a great set of World Youth Day alums joining us here for this webinar. This is great. I wonder who the person is that's been out to all of them. There's someone that's been out a lot of them, it looks like.
I'm the early ones.
I didn't do it, but I'm one of the early ones too.
Now we're going to go to the next question. What's one word that you would use to describe World Youth Day? What's a few words that you would use to describe World Youth Day? And you know how a word cloud works.
Wordle.
That are most popular. Pilgrimage certainly is one of the words that is coming up that has been mentioned the most just on this one. And that really is the distinguishing factor, I think, for World Youth Day. And for many young people, it is one of the first times many of them have had a chance to experience World Youth Day and experience a pilgrimage as World Youth Day provides. Love, energizing, universal, engaging. All right, awesome. And then our final one, you've had us have a chance to say a little bit about World Youth Day. So if you would just like to say just a real brief summary, how has World Youth Day impacted you in your ministry? For me, so 1993, I was in diocesan ministry as you're typing your responses. And 93, let's see, I was right at 30, I guess, somewhere in there. And I brought 8 busloads of folks. And I think there was a feeling, I might have had 2 hours of sleep a day if I was lucky on that trip. And even though I do tend to exaggerate, I'm not exaggerating that by any means. And I remember being so tired, but when I got back home from that experience, I felt so empowered, just like whoever typed that word in, that I felt at that point that I could do just about anything when it was involved in ministry, because it was such a transformational experience, I think, for youth ministry. We came home, and normally a retreat that we'd have maybe 60, 70 kids at, we had 110 kids sign up for. And normally I'd have been, oh, my God, what am I going to do with 110 kids? And I thought, oh, that's no problem. It's only 110 of them. I just had 400 on 8 buses for 7 days. So everything kind of had a World Youth Day perspective back then. And I really feel like that kind of thing happens across the church as well. These are some great, great things. Well, thank y'all so much for sharing your stories there, being inspired, trusting. Oh, this is great. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If I can get back to where I want to be. There we go. And we should be back at the top point now. Is that right?
Yeah, we're back to the logos.
Okay, back to the logos. Great. Thank you.
And I just want you to know, just as a point of interest, my mouse is sitting on a mouse pad from World Youth Day 08, Sydney.
that was an amazing World Youth Day. So let's talk about a few key questions here as we move into the heart of this webinar. Eileen and Paul, I'd like to invite you to turn your cameras on. And
I don't have the logo.
All right, let me stop mine. So let's see. Do you have it now?
Nope, I don't. Yeah, there it is. I have it now.
Okay.
Paul, if y'all would go ahead and put y'all's on.
Okay, I don't have my camera yet.
Okay. Well, let's start with Eileen then.
Yes.
Then we'll move to you, Paul. Eileen, why is World Youth Day so important? And what is the legacy of World Youth Day briefly in your mind, in light of all of what we've been talking about?
Well, I guess because I'm a sister, I'll start with this one. We did some research when I was at USCCB, and one of the things we discovered, the legacy of it, is that it has provided the foundation, if you will, or the push for those considering or pursuing a life of service to the church. So from a 2013 study, we found that 1 in 5 priests and 1 in 4 religious listed World Youth Day as a significant impact on their vocation, and that they had a good experience there, and so it was important to them. Cardinal Dolan frequently tells a story of a young couple that met there and married. So it's not just religious vocations, but it also has given rise to vocations of folks to serve within the church's lay ecclesial ministers. So that's one thing. The other thing we discovered that after Madrid, especially after Madrid, World Youth Day had a significant impact in our diocese and parishes' outreach to Hispanics and young adults and pastoral juveniles. So you talk to young people. I mean, I met an adult the other day in the diocese of Syracuse. I met him for some business transaction, and he remarked in the course of the conversation that he had gone to Denver, and he was a young adult chaperone, and what an impact it made on his life. I asked him to send me a story about that, but he was too shy to do it. But I think if you talk to many people, they'll tell you World Youth Day and the importance of in their faith life that had on them, that it was a transforming moment, and I think people said transforming.
Yeah, thank you, sister. So why don't you turn your camera off, and we'll let Paul turn his on. Paul, being a part of Denver and helping to plan that event and to see what happened as the church came together to plan that jointly, all the different movements and all the things that happened. From your perspective, thinking back to that time, why is World Youth Day so important, and what legacy do you think it left for the U.S. especially?
Well, one of the things I'd like to share with you, and I'll raise it up, it's probably backwards, is that World Youth Day was so important to the state of Colorado that they made special license plates.
There you go.
And so one of my mementos is the license plate I had for World Youth Day. But you know, when I was thinking about this question, four things really struck me about the legacy and the impact of World Youth Day. I think the first thing, and this follows up with what Sister Eileen was saying, is that in many respects, especially with Denver, World Youth Day was the first time that young people realized that, especially in Denver, that they were part of something bigger than their own parish group,
right,
or youth group, and that young people themselves were so blown away when they interacted and they saw hundreds of thousands of other young people. So it really was that impact of youth feeling that we're part of something bigger. It's not just me and my parish, but there's a lot of young people that really believe and are engaged in the church and love Christ. You know, the second thing we've talked about that is very much the evangelization of the bishops. And in many respects, I think it began and it strengthened and it launched a greater awareness of bishops about the value of youth ministry. The third thing was it really did introduce, and I'd love to see when the word pilgrimage came up, because I think it was really the first time in United States youth ministry history where pilgrimage really became understood in the field of youth work. It was there, but a lot of times people thought, well, pilgrimage, oh, that's my mom and dad, or my grandmother and my grandfather going to Medjugorje or to Panama or someplace like that. And so there was that whole sense of a journey. And even today with when we talk about the value of accompaniment, pilgrimage is a journey. And it was amazing that I think there were over 100,000 youth from the United States that we figured actually did defined pilgrimages to Denver. And then the fourth thing, and this is more of an inside baseball internal thing, was that World Youth Day Denver really was seminal in strengthening the relationship of the U.S. bishops and the Holy See. It really created a bond of understanding and a bond of collaboration between the Bishops' Conference and the Holy See and a number of the offices. And it was sort of like there was a new awareness of the vitality of the church life. I can remember Monsignor Dennis Schnurr, who is now Archbishop Schnurr, and I were going around with 3 representatives from the Vatican Laity Office looking at 3 cities. And we were in Buffalo, New York on Ash Wednesday. And the Vatican folks were blown away. And they said, where are all these people going to church? We said, well, it's Ash Wednesday. Everyone's going to get their ashes. And the other thing was that the Holy See was really amazed at the multicultural face of the church in the United States. And so those are really important things that.
Thanks.
One thing I would like to add to and this remains to be seen, but I hope this will be a legacy of World Youth Day. And that is that young people come together regardless of where they're from and celebrate the cultures of one another and realize that they have more in common than what divides them. That maybe we can start to move toward a global oneness.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like and hope to see that as a legacy of World Youth Day, because certainly that's what happens when they are together. And if the world needs anything right now, that's what the world needs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it does seem like that's the legacy. So moving on to the next question, Gabriella, I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about how you have experienced, let's go back, World Youth Day. How has World Youth helped to transform young people in the church's ministry with them from your perspective?
Sure. So I'll just briefly mention how the life of others have changed around me, and also mention how my life changed thanks to World Youth Day. So out of the 72 young adults that went with us to Krakow 2 years ago, one has discerned that priesthood is his vocation. 2 of them have discerned that actually religious life and priesthood were not their vocation, and they're about to get married. One of them has pursued a master's in theology, and 2 of them left their careers to go and work for the church or a ministry in the church. So just out of the 72, mentioning these 6, 8 people who you can tangibly see how their lives changed or decisions were made with the help of Pope Francis and all the World Youth Day events in Krakow is amazing. In my case, 18 years ago, I mentioned that they dragged me, because they did drag me to Rome. I was this professional young adult searching life success. I was living in Manhattan. As a matter of fact, I had to decide between going to Rome or going to the beach in the Mediterranean. And so I was living a life of sin. I was a light Catholic. I will go to Mass on Sundays, but nothing else. Well, my friends from the church convinced me to go a couple of days to World Youth Day, and that changed my life. When I arrived, they were all talking about the indulgences, and I had never heard about the plenary indulgences. So I was like, great, I'm gonna walk under the St. Peter Basilica's door, and my life will be changed. But I was very skeptical about the whole thing. It was not until we were next to the cross of World Youth Day that I had to wait about 4 hours to touch the cross, and next to the cross there were priests offering confessions. So kudos to all those priests who really listen confessions many hours per day in World Youth Day, because that changed my life. I did a confession of 2 hours. After that, I was able to feel the grace of a plenary indulgence. And my life changed, because when I arrived to New York, I literally packed my apartment. I abandoned my career, and I moved to Houston to start studying theology and work for the church, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years. Now I'm very honored and humbled to bring the cross where I had a conversion to Houston next Thursday. And I'm very happy that many young people will be able to say their confessions next to this cross, as I did 18 years ago. One thing, the theme was Emmanuel, which meant God is with us. That was the theme of Rome in 2000. And Pope John Paul hammered on us if we were going to answer to God or not. So many times he asked us that question, how are you going to answer to God? And it was in one of those questions that I was able to clearly see that I have to serve God, no men. So that was my testimony.
Well, thank you so much. That's a beautiful story. And I think it's a story that I know that I have heard echoed throughout people's witnessing about World Youth Day, that people have experienced that same transformation. As we look to the future, Paul Jarzembowski, how do you think the vision of St. John Paul II will continue for World Youth Day 2019 in Panama and also the stateside celebrations?
Thank you. Yeah, I really think that one of the things that Pope Francis has really kind of taken on the legacy of John Paul II is when World Youth Day was meant for the world. It was meant for the globe to really celebrate faith. And one of the struggles that we've had with World Youth Days has been that it's often an opportunity for those who have much to be able to go. So those from affluent countries or those from affluent families can afford the travel to go overseas or to wherever the World Youth Day is. And I think Pope Francis is really drawing attention to the peripheries, holding the World Youth Day in a very impoverished area of the world in Central America. And so I think part of that is a reminder to say people, we can't just do this in the land of those who have much for people who have much, but rather it's for all people. And I think that's what John Paul really wanted this to be. I wanted this to be an opportunity for the world to gather. Sister Eileen spoke about the fact that this hopefully will give many pilgrims an opportunity to see the global church. I think by further pushing us to the peripheries, I think it continues to do that. I think in the United States, the emergence of the stateside celebrations, the digital celebrations, involves more young people. There are young people in our country who cannot travel due to financial reasons, to documentation, immigration status. They can't travel outside the United States. So how can they be a part of this? And I think a lot of these stateside and digital gatherings are giving them an opportunity to experience John Paul's legacy that Francis has continued on. And not to forget Benedict as well. I don't want to forget him there. But I think that that's part of it. So the urge to go to the peripheries. This particular World Youth Day, I think, would make John Paul really happy in that there is such a connection to the theme of Mary. Mary, who has such a prominent place in the Latin American reality, is a major player in the theming of this World Youth Day. And John Paul loved Mary. You know, totus tuus, his motto, his love was for the Blessed Mother. So this World Youth Day will carry on that legacy. And I think also one thing that we're seeing from the United States is an emergence of the number of pilgrims who go who are in their young adult years and who are Hispanic Latino is been exploding in the last couple of years. So from the United States, I think we're bringing more people into this conversation that weren't there before. And I think that's a wonderful movement ahead for our country. I also, you know, one of the last question they were talking about also the impact on the church's ministry. I think we can't also forget the World Youth Day doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a world with many current events, and right now we know the church is engaged in another crisis of sorts. And so I think what World Youth Day teaches the world is how to be a responsible church with our young people, how to engage young people as those who need to be accompanied in responsible ways, in safe ways, and in ways that are healthy. And I think World Youth Day presents to the world that vision that I think we need to know what kind of relationship does the church need to have with its young people. And I think it provides a great antidote to some of the negativity and some of the mistrust that's out there. So, so I think that's another aspect of how it's continuing that vision, but also how the church is learning from World Youth Day and how it can continue to learn from it. Because I think there's a spirit there that I think the church needs right now.
So, Paul, I'm gonna allow for some questions in just a moment, but I thought maybe you might just take a moment here since your camera's on, maybe to explain why World Youth Day is in January this year. I know a number of people are concerned about that because it's going to impact people's ability to participate. So I know that's one of the questions that people have been having. And then maybe just to talk about a little bit about those stateside celebrations. We'll go through the list of webinars in a minute, but just maybe some places that you think people might be able to make a connection that you know about.
Sure. So first on the date. The date was chosen a collaboration between what the Holy Father, the Vatican Dicastery for Laity, and then the Panama organizers really talked together about this. January is the ideal time for a World Youth Day in Central and South America. The weather is much better than it would be in July or August. So right now, if we were to go over to Panama, it would be very hot and rainy, humid, and miserable. In January, it will still be warm, but you'll also have a cool ocean breeze, and it won't rain as much. In fact, it may not rain at all. Of course, I just said that. Of course, I just really I know. But January is great weather. January is also a time so that those who are from the Southern Hemisphere, who have holiday, who are off of school at that time of year, can experience. Again, it's a reminder to us of the peripheries, because many of those in the Southern Hemisphere are those who are in the peripheries of our society. They don't have the means many times to attend World Youth Day when they're in our traditional summertime. So January allows those from South America, for those from Africa, from those from Asia and Oceania who are in the Southern Hemisphere, to experience World Youth Day at a time that is best for them. So that's one way to look at it.
Great.
In terms of the stateside thing, I know that from the United States, not as many people are able to travel to World Youth Day in Panama. So there are going to be a number of stateside celebrations. We don't know all of the details yet, but I know many of the major cities, Washington, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, will probably, I think down in Houston, will be having different stateside celebrations. Those details are still emerging, so we don't know details. The one event we do know there's a number of details already released about is the one in Washington, D.C., here right across the street from where I'm standing right now, at the Catholic University of America. They're expecting about 2,000 or 3,000 young adults to gather on the campus of CUA at the JP2 Shrine here in Washington for that gathering. But there will be many others in other parts of the country. And our website will have that. And even if you can't wait for that, whether you're going to Panama or you're not going to Panama and you're going to do a stateside experience, next week, actually, and Gabriella hinted at this, one major announcement that if you haven't heard yet, next week the official World Youth Day Cross and Marian Icon will be in the United States on a pilgrimage tour. This is the first time that the Cross has made a tour of our country in 25 years. It made a brief stop right after September 11th in New York, but it was only there for about a day and it went back to Canada. This will be a week, over a week's journey from coast to coast, and it will be hitting the cities of Chicago, Miami, Houston, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. Will all have special events around the World Youth Day Cross. And so if you've ever been to a World Youth Day, if you're going to a World Youth Day, this is an opportunity to, again, connect to that experience, because the World Youth Day Cross is the symbol of this World Youth Day. It's the Olympic torch of this event that John Paul passed on to the young people, and they've carried it around the world. And so we're very lucky, thanks to the generosity of Panama, to allow us to host it for a week. And so August 19 through 27, it will be touring the United States. You can go to wydusa.org to see the full schedule and to get links to all the different cities and the activities that you can visit the icon when it comes near you.
All right.
So that will be live streamed as well. So even if you're nowhere near those cities, there's going to be some live streaming opportunities that week as well, and our website will have links to that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the World Youth Day Cross is a very special cross, and so that's great that they're letting us have. I didn't realize it hadn't been here in 25 years. I actually had it in my diocese in Mobile, and I really didn't know back then because I had never been to a World Youth Day how important that cross was. I'm not saying that I wasn't careful with it, but if I would have realized what it was and what it was going to be, I think I'd have been a little bit more nervous than I was. But anyway. So I want to just give an opportunity for a few questions. Does anybody have any questions? If you type them in the chat there, or any comments that folks want to make before we move on to telling you about some of the other World Youth Days that will be coming up, webinars rather, that will be coming up soon. Do you have any questions that you see, Alex, that I'm missing? I don't see any.
I have one question here that says, how would the panel suggest that future youths may participate, given that Catholic Schools Week starts on January 27th?
Well, that's a great question. I'll start, and if others want to add in, I would say that we've been working with the National Catholic Educational Association, and so they're aware, and they're also working with their members to see if there's ways to tie the themes of Catholic Schools Week with World Youth Day. And so there's going to be some connection with the theming. But also, one of the ways, too, is, in classes, if people are there during the day, to, if teachers want to show the live stream of the events happening in Panama, the talks with Pope Francis, or even the U.S. gatherings. I know that different media outlets will be covering, and I know the USCCB will be also covering live stream that will have some access, so people can do that during the school days, and maybe even have conversations about it in the classroom. So that's certainly a way to tie it in with the Catholic schools.
Okay, great. Thanks. Anything else, Alex?
So one question that we have here is that since Pope John Paul II has become a saint, do you think that pilgrims are more excited about attending a program called World Youth Day than in the past?
I'm sure his sainthood probably has elevated that. It'd be interesting, though. I wonder how many well, I guess if you went to Krakow, you pretty much knew John Paul II was central to World Youth Day. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but maybe so. What do you think, Paul?
I would say that, as evidenced by Krakow, Krakow was one of our largest. In fact, it was the largest World Youth Day attendance from the United States outside of North America. So, so we had 40,000 from the United States that attended, and so I would say that his legacy has made World Youth Day that much more palpable for people. I mean, in a way, World Youth Day is a living relic of that saint. He crafted it. He imagined it. It was in his mind. It was in his heart, and he really responded to the young people coming to Rome on Palm Sunday through those years, and that connection, it lives on. So, much of what we experience at World Youth Day is really John Paul II's legacy that he has handed down to the church. So, I would think that there's a lot of people who would get excited about that. But there's also as many people who are excited about Pope Francis as well. And I think that his legacy is now intertwined with John Paul's legacy in this event. I think World Youth Day, we will see over time, will be one of those things where many of our popes, their impact on it, John Paul, Benedict, and Francis, and whoever should follow Francis, they will all add their own unique components to World Youth Day, and it will all tie together. So I look forward to young people who've been inspired by Benedict and Francis also to continue to explore this. I think all the popes have had an impact. I think if you're excited about any of them, World Youth Day will certainly suffice for that.
So I think we have a question here from Eric about how to prepare new pilgrims who will attend Panama, and what's the best way to prepare youth and teens. Eric, this webinar is not going to get into details on that, but the upcoming webinars certainly will. So next month, almost a month from today, we'll have another webinar that will talk about World Youth Day Panama, and it'll give a lot of those details about how to prepare your pilgrims that are going to Panama. And there's a number of resources that are out there. Paul, if you go to, you want to tell them where they can find the resources to help prepare their teens and adults that are be going for World Youth Day? the World Youth Day Resource Guide? Where can they get those?
You can get all of that. Well, there's two ways. One is the website you see on the bottom of the screen that our collaborators at the Catholic Apostolate Center are maintaining at WYD2019. What is that? My screen.
.us.
.us. And also WYDUSA.org. So if you put any combination of either one of those, you'll probably get to it. But yeah, those websites have all the resource manuals for people who would like ideas on how to prepare.
Eric, we're also working on some videos that'll be published in this area too. So there's a number of resources that exist already, but some that will be coming out in the next couple of months.
I highly recommend to use the Pilgrim Journal. It is a wonderful resource for all the pilgrims to prepare themselves on a monthly basis before January and 12 months after January coming down the mountain.
Thank you so much. That is a really good resource. You're absolutely right. So our next one will be about World Youth Day Panama and stateside, some orientations to what's going to be happening. In November, we'll be talking about safety and security, and so that'll be an important one to join us for. We'll have some folks from the embassy joining us to help prepare us for that. On Thursday, December 13th, we're really going to be focusing on this whole stateside celebration, but not just the big stateside celebrations that Paul is referring to in the big cities that he mentioned, but other ways, like how do parishes and schools celebrate World Youth Day, especially given the fact that it's in January this year, and we will have lower attendance from the U.S. This webinar will really highlight for folks how to celebrate locally. And then Tuesday, January 8th, we'll have our final webinar preparing those that are going to be going to Panama and also those that will be involved in stateside celebration. So we'll get in, Eric, to some of those practical realities in the next few webinars. I'd like to, before we finish up here, thank the two Pauls, Paul Henderson and Paul Jarzembowski, Sister Eileen McCann and Gabriella, all of you for joining us for this webinar. You did an excellent job. It was great reminiscing with you and reflecting on the importance of World Youth Day, the importance of World Youth Day to our church. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for your participation. You did a great job. And I'll turn it back over to Alice to finish this up.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And thank you to all of our panelists for presenting. And thank you for everyone who tuned in and joined us this afternoon. We'll have a recording of this webinar uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next week, so please keep an eye out there. And on our website, CatholicApostolatecenter.org and WYD2019.us for the link. You're welcome to share it with anyone you'd like. As always, all of our content is free to share. If you haven't found us on social media yet, please like and follow World Youth Day USA and the Catholic Apostolate Center on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram in the hope that we'll continue to reach more people with spreading the message of the gospel. In the words of St. Vincent Plauti, may the charity of Christ urge you on. Good afternoon and God bless.